And greetings, everyone, and welcome to Buzz for Good, where we talk all things nonprofit, the people they serve and the good they do. And today I am buzzing about Masterpiece Alliance, a Roanoke, Virginia nonprofit with a mission of building community for adults with intellectual disabilities. And I will be speaking with Scott Habib, who founded Masterpiece Alliance in part to help people like his daughter who struggle to make friends and find social connections once they graduate from high school. One place where we might assume they can find community is the church. But as Scott shares, that's often not the case for a variety of reasons, and his organization has created an upcoming conference designed to fix that. And I'm looking forward to sharing it with you. But first, I am Michael Hemphill, creator and host of this radio show, Buzz for Good, and the TV show Buzz that airs on Blue Ridge PBS and other public television stations across the country. On each episode of Buzz, we feature the great work that nonprofits do in our communities and the marketing professionals who donate their time and talent to help these life-giving organizations achieve more buzz. And you can follow along on our Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn channels at Buzz for Good. That's Buzz, B-U-Z-Z, 4 Good. You can also go to our YouTube channel at Buzz for Good and watch one of our more than 60 episodes to date. One episode we're going to start creating soon, thanks to funding that we have received from the Louise Lester Foundation, is on Masterpiece Alliance. And among its marketing challenges is the need to get the word out about its February 22nd conference to help churches become more accessible and welcoming to adults with intellectual disabilities. So to kick off my conversation with founder and executive director Scott Habib, here is the audio from a 2.5-minute promotional video that I created for Masterpiece Alliance about the conference, which is called The Church and Disability: Equipping God's Masterpieces.
Hi, my name is Scott Habib, and I am the Executive Director of Masterpiece Alliance.
Hi, I'm KJ Boland, and I'm the Director of Ministry with Masterpiece Alliance.
Masterpiece Alliance is a Roanoke-based nonprofit dedicated to creating community for people of all abilities.
We're creating a community because we're trying to change an unfortunate reality that exists, and here it is.
Just like people with disabilities are too often not included in regular society, they also tend to not be included in the church. People with disabilities and their families attend church at a significantly lower rate than the rest of society does. And we don't think any church sets out intentionally to make people with disabilities feel unwelcomed. But the reality is there are a lot of barriers, some real, some perceived, that cause people with disabilities to feel that they just don't belong in the church.
So why are we sharing this with you? It's because we know that you and your church desire to change these realities.
In fact, in Luke 14, Jesus says, when you have a banquet, you have to invite the marginalized, and that includes the people with disabilities. In 1 Corinthians 12, Paul writes about the body and how each part is so important. But he says that the parts that are often the weakest are really the most indispensable.
So we have an exciting invitation for you, for all of you.
On Saturday, February 22nd, Masterpiece Alliance is hosting a one-day workshop called The Church and Disability, and we want you to join us.
We hope that every Sunday school teacher, staff member, youth group volunteer, lay leader, and parent will consider attending.
This workshop is designed to get us excited about embracing the world of disabilities. It's going to help us change those realities we talked about and help churches in our area become the places of belonging we all want them to be.
Right now, you can sign up for the early bird rate of $40 per person. And for every 4 people your church sends, a 5th can attend for free.
Masterpiece Alliance is dedicated to building a community for people of all abilities, but we'll never reach every single person with a disability. But if the churches in our region very intentionally became places where people with disabilities knew they belonged and had purpose, well, we think that would be a beautiful way to reveal the kingdom of Jesus to everyone around us. So go to masterpiecealliance.org and sign up for this workshop today. We can't wait to have you there.
All right, and it's my pleasure now to welcome here to Buzz for Good Scott Habib, who is the Executive Director and founder of Masterpiece Alliance. Scott, welcome.
Thanks, Michael. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So I've given people a little tease about what this conference is about.
Okay.
And we'll get to more about that in a second, kind of what was the motivation for creating that. But let's rewind a little bit and just share some of the history of Masterpiece Alliance.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, the history has a three-pronged journey, I guess, three
Yeah.
parts to the journey. One is that I am the father of four children, but one of whom is on the autism spectrum. And she is talented in so many ways and gifted in so many ways. But at the same time, because of autism, we've watched some struggles, especially socially over the years with same age peers. So that's something that my wife and I have been aware of as parents and have navigated. Another part of that journey is I've been in the public schools as an educator for the last 28 years now. Hard to
Wow.
believe. And in that time, I've watched young people with various intellectual and developmental disabilities graduate high school and have nothing for them.
Hmm.
While they're in school, they at least have 7 hours a day of peers and interactions and great teachers and events and activities. But it is so normal for folks to graduate high school and then really have nothing out there for them.
Yeah.
And the
There,
third
there,
part,
there's no school, there's no after that for the most part because they uh, and more often than not are not going to go to college, at least the current environment.
right? I mean, when I say nothing, there are things, but
Yeah.
it's different, right? And so what happens lots of times is families, their full-time job almost becomes finding places and avenues for their adult child to connect to.
Yeah.
And then other folks don't have that sort of family support system or the family doesn't have the means. And so a real sense of isolation sets in. And you
Sure.
just hear this over and over again. If you meet somebody who has an adult child with an intellectual developmental disability, if you pry a little bit and push a little bit and talk, you'll find that they feel a great sense of isolation. And that's the norm.
Right. Because it's not just autism, but there's Down syndrome, there's cerebral palsy, there's
Absolutely.
these sorts of
Traumatic
things.
brain injury. There's, yeah.
Injured. It
And
kind
you
of
know,
also limits their ability just to get out and about because
that's
they
right.
perhaps can't get a driver's license, and unless they live within walking distance of something. And even then, maybe it's not safe for them to go off alone. You know,
Yeah, and you might just lack the skills to navigate those worlds on your own, without some type of support in that environment. A little way to look at it is this: if a typical person thinks of their life as a bullseye, right, like archery target, and you start in the very middle, and you have your closest friends, family, family right there, and then right out there you have your closest friends, and then the next ring out you probably have another set of friends who are acquaintances. Maybe you hang out with them at work. They're not your
sure,
closest friends, but you interact with them regularly. And then you kind of go out and you have maybe the people you sit with on the sidelines of the soccer games. You know them, you say hi to them, but you don't know them very well. And then somewhere on the outside of that bullseye, you have your service providers, your doctor, your
Hmm.
accountant, these people who provide services for you. They're probably out on the outside of that bullseye. For an adult with an intellectual developmental disability, it tends to look like this. The middle of the bullseye is your family, and then right outside of it is your service providers. It's your job coach, it's a doctor, it's a therapist, it's a occupational therapist, physical therapist, someone like this, right? And then there is no other ring of friends. It
Yeah.
just doesn't really exist.
Hmm.
Uh, yeah, so that's the reality. And then the third piece for me is I've been involved with a ministry called Capernaum, which is part of Young Life. It is a ministry for adolescents with intellectual and developmental disabilities. But for lots of good reasons, folks age out of that around the age of 22, which is around the age that you were stopped receiving services from the public schools or that you could receive services until.
Okay.
And similarly, I would see nowhere for folks to go. So from these different avenues, that just became apparent something needs to be done to support and build community for adults with disabilities. We don't know what exactly, but I got some friends together and sort of shared this idea. And we're like, yeah, let's do something. We don't know what we're going to do, but let's do something. And that something led to what is now Masterpiece Alliance, which is a nonprofit located in Roanoke, Virginia. And we have our primary purpose is to create community for people of all abilities. Our vision is that reality of isolation would not exist. Our vision is that having an intellectual developmental disability would not equal isolation.
Yeah.
But just like neurotypical folks do, everybody would have community. And so we have built a community and been going at it for a few years now, and it is just awesome.
real quick, you share with me kind of the origins for the name Masterpiece, and I think
Yeah.
that's really important with what you guys are doing. So share that.
Yeah, when you start something, you try to come up with a name. I'm not super creative, and we sat down and we would have these conversations. What are we going to call ourselves? And what we end up landing on is this term Masterpiece Alliance. Sometimes we just call ourselves Masterpiece. It is a mouthful to say the whole thing, but in Ephesians 2:10 in the NLT translation, New Living Translation of that, when Paul is writing to the Christians in Ephesus, he says, "For we are God's masterpiece, created anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the great things that have been planned for us long ago." And so our idea is that like everybody's a masterpiece. There are no mistakes. We
Right.
are all these beautiful creations, and we all have these purposes set forth for us, right? So we are trying to help people identify themselves as masterpieces, but then as they join this community, this alliance, they would then find purpose for themselves, right? The purpose for a person, no person's purpose is to be cared for, even if you are cared for. Everyone has a purpose where they impact others somehow too. So we want to kind of build a community with a very flat hierarchy, where we are all community members, whether we're on staff or volunteers or someone with a disability. We are all community members. We all find community here. We all have purpose. We're all masterpieces. So we love to say our very first time we had a big event, it just sort of happened this way, and now we do it all the time. Someone in one of our clubs, one of our events, one of our activities will say, "Who are we?" And everyone yells out, "God's masterpiece." And it's really cool. Like it's just become our identity, and it's a true identity. And it's been fun to awaken that in our friends.
That is beautiful. Well, once again, joined here on Buzz for Good by Scott Habib, who is the founder and executive director of Masterpiece Alliance, a Roanoke, Virginia nonprofit that really is mission is to build community for adults with intellectual disabilities who often don't have community once they graduate high school and are kind of left on their own with just their primary caregivers to provide them with the social activities that they need just like anybody else. And I find it interesting, you use scripture from biblical scripture in order to, get the name Masterpiece Alliance. You just talked about God and Jesus, and yet, based on, some conversations we've had and observations you've had, there's a little bit of a disconnect with what Masterpiece hopes that local churches would be able to provide for adults with intellectual disabilities, which kind of led to the creation of this conference that you're having on February the 22nd. So,
Right.
yeah, tell me
Yeah.
about some of those challenges.
Well, the origin there goes, there's so many things you learn when you take a step on a journey, you start learning new things. So, one of the things that I have learned that we, part of Masterpiece Alliance, our board and staff has learned is that while there is isolation in the world for folks with disabilities, that isolation also exists within the church.
Yeah.
Somehow that doesn't seem like it should be. Like it seems like it should be the opposite.
Mhm.
We had some of our staff went to a conference called the Disability in the Church Conference. It's through a group called Key Ministry, and they went to Cleveland, Ohio, a couple of years ago. And they came back, and we sat around my kitchen table, and they were debriefing all the stuff they learned. And our director of ministry, KJ Boland, she said something to the effect, we'll never reach the needs of every adult with an intellectual or developmental disability in our region, but there are a lot of churches, and what if they got on board with this mission?
Yeah.
And so that got us starting what we call our church network. It's a very informal network of churches, but we have about 30 churches participating in lunches that take place every other month. We bring in outside speakers, we provide a nice lunch. We just explore different areas of what it looks like to have a disability and also how that connects to the church. And so that's been going since September of 2023 and all through last year. And it's been really just neat. But on that journey, we've learned a lot about churches.
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of experts out there in the country who know a lot more than we do. And as we learn from them and we read books, here's what we've learned: that people with disabilities and their families attend church at a far lower rate than the typical people. And the reason is there are so many barriers. Some of them are very real, some of them are perceived. They include things like physical barriers. One thing I learned along the way is that churches are exempt from the ADA. Now, there's a philosophical reason for that, the separation of church and state.
And when you say ADA, you're talking about the American Disabilities Act. Yeah.
Yes,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
The laws that require us to have ramps and and bathrooms that are handicapped accessible and so forth. Churches are exempt, and a big piece of that is the separation of church and state. We live in a country that values the government not controlling the religious organizations, so I get that. At the same time, it kind of seems to me like the church should have started the ADA, right? Like if you look, and
Right.
I don't want to get too preachy here, but if anyone were to read through one of the Gospels of the New Testament and just kind of pay attention to what Jesus does, he basically has this pattern. If you are in the inside, if you're the in group of people, he's probably chewing you out.
Yeah.
You're marginalized, which at that time included disabilities. It also would include women, include people from different countries, people who were ill, all sorts of people who were considered, bad people. If you were marginalized, he was probably having dinner with you. He was probably having friendships with you, and he was going and making you part of community. And so
Amen.
it seems like the church actually ought to be doing this. So, and I anybody who's listening to this who loves their church, I'm not trying to make fun of the church or knock the church or criticize the church. It's just I actually love the church. I'm part of a church and I value what it does and I want it to be better.
Yeah.
So we have set about as a second part of our mission is to support and equip local churches to build themselves into places of belonging for folks with disabilities and to equip them for roles and purpose that they get to play.
Yeah, and it's not just what we've just been talking about, I guess, physical remedies to making churches more accessible with, but really though, it's more the, I guess, emotional, psychological issues that go with welcoming folks who have intellectual disabilities into your congregation, because we oftentimes think of, church as being this place very solemn and quiet, and we go in there and we enter reverently, and we're all quiet while the minister is, providing a sermon, and that's oftentimes though not what someone with intellectual disabilities is coming into that setting with. Is that correct?
That is correct. Absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're going to get me going here, but it's basically the same things that exist in the regular world exist in the church, but then they get magnified because so often church is supposed to be this quiet, reverent place where, basically here's the thing. In life, there are all these norms we're supposed to follow, social norms. Everywhere you go, there's social norms. And for folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, it is often difficult to know how to follow the social norms. When those social norms are heightened the way they are in the church, in many churches, most churches, lots of churches, it is even harder to follow those.
Yeah.
And on top of that, then people turn and look at you and say, shh,
Yeah.
And so what people report is that folks with disabilities and their families report leaving because they weren't made to feel welcome. So sometimes, for example, this takes place in some type of children's Sunday school youth ministry where the teachers, leaders, volunteers don't know how to support the person with disabilities. So maybe the person's 15 years old, but they're still in the 5-year-old class, or maybe they say at some point, hey, we just don't have a place for you, or they get in trouble, there's some type of consequence. And so families will just say, the heck with it, we're just going to leave. It happens in main services. So, a lot of churches will have, here's an idea that we have, and we've stolen this from other folks, but is, if a church has a quiet room, then maybe the people should go into it are the folks who need to worship in absolute silence. Okay. That's who goes to the quiet room. But then if somebody makes some noise, because that's just who they are, like that people are okay with that in the main service. That would be like an example, a symptom of what we think is things looking right in the church.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Let me reintroduce you real quick. Scott Habib, founder and executive director of Masterpiece Alliance, which works to create community for adults with intellectual disabilities. And you've got a conference coming up on February the 22nd that is open to all churches, just to learn more about how churches can become more not just accommodating, but accessible and welcoming of people with intellectual disabilities. So you've kind of set the stage here for why this work is so important, because so oftentimes churches, not intentionally, but have just not made themselves uh, open and warm to folks with intellectual disabilities. But what could they expect with this conference on February the 22nd?
We hope a lot of folks will come to this. We think it's really important work, and we think it's the beginning of work. We don't think that someone's going to come to our one day workshop and suddenly everything's changed. But what we really hope will happen along with some learning is just real connections between churches. One thing that's been fun for us as we've had these lunches in this church network over the last year is we'll get together and have a luncheon, and there'll be in the room, there'll be folks who attend the Catholic Church, folks from all different Baptist churches, Methodist, Church of the Brethrens, non-denominational churches, Assemblies of God. And it's really beautiful to see all these different folks, expressions of the church in one place. So we kind of think disabilities is sort of bringing people together. And so we hope that'll happen too. But if you come to this workshop, we have several goals. One is that you'll be inspired and excited about the idea of embracing disabilities. You know, if a young family walks into a church, nobody who is on the staff or leadership of the church goes, "Oh my gosh, there's a young family. What are we going to do? Oh my gosh, what are we going to do?" Instead, you see a young family, you say, "Yes, we've been waiting for a young family like you. We've got a role for you, a place for you." But when folks with disabilities come in, often the thought is, "Oh, geez, what are we going to do? Like, are we
Right.
ready?" We want folks to say, "We've been waiting on you. Like,
Mm.
we can't wait to have what you bring
Yeah.
to us as a part of us." So we want to inspire folks and get them excited. We have a keynote speaker, a guy named Ryan Wolf. He's coming in from Canton, Ohio. He's the president of Ability Ministry, and he's outstanding. People are going to love listening to him and his message, but then also connecting to some of the breakout sessions he'll be doing, some very practical things. For example, one of the sessions he's going to do is like 10 ways to work with someone who's nonverbal. So I mean that's real, right? That's something that you actually do need to have some support in or some skills in. So we're going to have sessions that are very practical. Like we have a special ed teacher who's going to be doing a session on structured supports within the classroom. We have a PhD in special ed who's also got a lot of work with behavior and background in behavior, who's going to be helping folks understand behavior and what behavior is and how different behaviors are communication. We're going to look at scriptural supports for working with disabilities. We're going to have sessions on how your church, by embracing disabilities, can actually kind of motivate and be a catalyst for your church to have people getting involved in bigger
Mm.
mission.
Hmm.
Just give a quick example. Like there's a lot of different ministries out there, and every church would love to see its people like really involved in stuff, right? Not just show up on a Sunday and then like see you next week, but to really be involved. But a lot of things seem unattainable, right? Like, people look at, do I have to be Mother Teresa? I don't think I'm equipped to do that, or whatever the high bar is.
Yeah.
Come Hanging out in the world of disabilities is a very accessible place to love
Mm.
folks. I tell people sometimes when I invite people to be a part of what we're doing, they'll say, "I don't know if I'm qualified." And I'll say, "Hey, as long as you're nice and you know how to be a friend, you're qualified. If you're not nice, we don't want you around. But if you're nice, come on." That's literally the threshold to be involved in the world of disabilities. It's just can you be a friend? And so we think churches will leave excited. They'll have a lot of practical strategies and ideas from the various sessions we're offering. How to support parents. That's going to be one of the sessions.
Mhm.
But they're also going to be excited about their churches getting on mission and maybe having a whole new chapter of their church's journey.
Well, it's hearing you talk about this, I think I came into this conversation thinking, okay, how can churches better help not only adults with intellectual disabilities, but their families? How can churches help them? And hearing you talk about it, it also seems like though perhaps churches have been missing an opportunity to become better, and with having folks with intellectual disabilities as part of the congregation.
Yeah, I mean, wow, that's it. Yes, yes. Thanks for finding that in there. Yeah, so I mean, I put it this way: is you know, again, not sorry if I'm getting too preachy here, but
Oh.
I really believe, based off of the Genesis, that we are created in the image of God, meaning all of us are meant to bear the image of God. So when we go into the world, each of us, we're a masterpiece. We each carry kind of a picture of God. In the church, it's sort of like a mosaic, right? Like we all bring a little bit of that together, but there are some of these mosaic pieces, or if you look at it like a puzzle, some puzzle pieces missing. It's folks with disabilities. They bring another element to the image of God to the whole picture. And if you now I'm going to get kind of, well, if go back to Genesis, whether you think it's literal, figurative, doesn't matter. We were made naked, right? Buck naked, no clothes on. And that's the way it was supposed to be, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And then the moment that the fruit was eaten and sin happened, people had put on clothes. And if you think about this metaphorically, not literally, we wear clothes, but metaphorically, we put on clothes constantly, right? We put on an image. We want to be seen a certain way. And this is a struggle for all of us, teenagers, adults, whoever. We all kind of, the image matters. And when you walk into a room of folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, if you come to a Masterpiece event, it is butt naked. We have clothes on, but it is
Right.
like just free. You are loved and supported because you exist. The friendships are built so quickly and they're so real. And that is missing
Yeah.
from the church. We are all going in there. I mean, church is a great place for, how you doing? Oh, I'm fine. Like we hide our problems, right? We don't want anyone to see. But when you go into the world of disabilities, or you bring the world of disabilities into you, you bring real, honest, true life and love. And it is a gift to anybody, including the church.
Yeah, there is no artifice. There is no social norm or expectation. It is just pure heart and humanity is what I'm hearing you say about,
Yeah.
working with.
When we started Masterpiece, we said we were creating community for friends with disabilities. And then we changed it to creating community for friends of all abilities, because what we realized is this is my community, right? Our staff say this is their community. We're not just doing something for people. We
Yeah.
are literally in community, frankly, like we've never been before in our entire lives. Yeah, and that is a gift that the church too often is missing out on.
All right, so coming to an end of our conversation here with
Sure.
Scott Habib, who is the founder and executive director of Masterpiece Alliance, a Roanoke, Virginia nonprofit that works to build community for adults with intellectual disabilities who typically live in some sort of isolation because there is no community outside of their immediate family. And on February the 22nd, uh, Masterpiece Alliance is hosting a conference that the goal of which is to get churches to become more welcoming and open for adults with intellectual disabilities, and in turn, become more perhaps open and embracing of the gospel mission that they profess to proclaim. And so, very exciting. Give us some details specifically about how to become part of this conference.
Absolutely. If you head over to masterpiecealliance.org, so masterpiecealliance.org, we have a banner at the top of the page that you can click on. In fact, if it's the first time you've been to the website, a pop-up is going to come with a big advertisement for the workshop. And so you just click on there and register. We really hope that individuals will register. We also hope that churches will think strategically about who to send. Ideally, we think all church staff should attend something like this. Depending on how the church is structured, lay leadership, things in churches, too often something like this that is pushed by a parent of a child with disabilities. And we really think that leadership matters. And so we hope church leaders will come and just have their eyes opened and be better aware of the need to support what those moms are doing or whoever else is wanting to do. We hope that Sunday school teachers will come and youth volunteers will come. There's going to be so many practical ideas for them. We hope that parents will come and anybody who has a passion for the world of disabilities. So we're giving discounts for teams. Like if you have 4 people sign up, the 5th one's for free. So we hope that churches might really think about sending a team of 10 or 15 people, even depending on the size of the church. So if they go to masterpiecealliance.org, you can click on the link and sign up. We have an early bird rate going for the next couple of weeks till middle of January. So yeah, and then on our website or on our social media, Facebook or Instagram, you can find our contact information. If anybody has questions, they could call, they could email, they could reach out, and we can help make sure that this works for folks.
Outstanding. Well, Scott Habib with Masterpiece Alliance, thank you so much for the work you're doing, not only for adults with intellectual disabilities, but for everyone who perhaps does not have the opportunity, the joy to have someone with intellectual disabilities in their lives. Appreciate all that you're doing, and we wish you the best with the conference.
Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk with you.
And thank you so much for tuning in to today's Buzz for Good. Remember to stay connected with us throughout the week on our website, buzzforgood.com. That's buzz, B-U-Z-Z, 4, good.com. as well as our social media channels, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, also at Buzz for Good. We hope you continue being a buzz for good in the community that you hold dear, and we'll look forward to seeing you back here next time on Buzz for Good. Bye now.